So, good morning. I know that I am out today and you are with Miss Rose. I do want you to finish your Plate Tectonics flip book. So, I am going to be sharing my screen and helping you get through that. So, anytime you need to pause and do your drawing, just pause me. Hopefully, you all have AirPods or earbuds or headphones or something so that we're not all bothering each other during this recording. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is, and now let me think if I can remember. I think we were on the very last part of our convergent boundaries. And remember that when we talk about convergence, that means two plates coming together. They're converging. That's what that C, remember the C in your head. C, convergence, come together. So with the last part, I'm trying to find my picture here, guys. The last part of that, I guess it would help if I shared the picture, is going to be a continent to continent convergence. And it looks just like this. So you will see two continents coming together and they're going to push up. That's what those arrows are showing. One of the continents is going to ride up on top of the other one. Remember, the continents are big and fat and they're not dense enough to subduct or sink into the mantle. They're just not dense enough. Remember that analogy of the beach ball on top of the swimming pool. It just won't naturally do it. However, one of the continents will get on top of the other. It'll push and push and push until one of them is on top and one is on the bottom. And there are going to be some things that you get, namely mountain ranges. And that's not the only thing that you get from this. And like I said, remember, if you need to pause this while you're drawing, go ahead and pause. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and move on with a different share. And I'm going to talk to you about the effects and the examples of continent to continent convergence on the whiteboard. So you should all be able to see the whiteboard right now. And with continent to continent convergent boundaries, we have some really good examples. One of those examples, let me get this. The first examples are our mountains, the Appalachian Mountains. They're an example of continent to continent convergence. They were formed about 200 million years ago when Africa and North America collided very, very slowly over thousands and millions of years. Another example are the, whoops, if I could spell, Himalayan Mountains. They're another example, and they're younger than us, and that's why they're so much larger. However, our mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, they were just as large, if not bigger, than the Himalayan Mountains 200 million years ago. So just imagine if you're standing outside and I've taken you over into the mountains of West Virginia and you look up. I want you to imagine if the mountains were about another mile to a mile and a half straight up into the sky. That's how big our mountains were. And to me, that's incredible. So what else happens? What are the effects of two continents colliding? Well, we get folded mountains. And those are like the Appalachian Mountains. That's when they push together and the rock gets so hot, it doesn't melt, because remember, there's no subduction, but it gets so hot, it can bend. And so you get these folds in the mountains. You also get whoops, metamorphic rock, because remember, when rock is under a lot of pressure and it heats up, it changes or metamorphoses. And so it creates a whole other kind of rock that we call metamorphic, and that's the hardest type of rock on Earth. And lastly, you get earthquakes and faults or fault zones. That's where earthquakes occur. And so that is the last effect that's really important for you to understand about folded mountains. So go ahead and pause it here if you need to. I'm going to clear this out and I'm going to move on with a different share. All right, the next thing, if I can find it, the next item I want to share is you're going to start, whoops, if I could even do this right. You guys are going to start your second, oh, sorry guys, you're going to start your second section. So now we're no longer on convergence. The plates are no longer coming together. Now we're going to start dividing. Now we're going into divergent plate boundaries. So I want you, let me share this. I want you to draw your next section like this. So you want to turn over. Remember, you're only drawing on the bottom portion, and you're going to write the word divergent. And then I want you to draw two arrows that remind you which direction your plates are moving. Now, the interesting thing about a divergent plate boundary is that it only happens between two oceanic plates or between two continental plates. It doesn't happen with ocean and continents together. So let's take a look and see what that's going to look like. Let me find your next picture. So we are going to start with an ocean to ocean boundary, and that is going to look like this. Now, ocean to ocean is going to be completely underwater, and you have two pieces of oceanic crust that are pulling apart, and magma is rising up in between them, and it's where new crust is formed. So brand new crust is being formed under the oceans, actually right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It is where your largest mountain chain in the entire world is. And so your ocean crust is moving like towards the beaches. Okay, so if we were out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and you waited a few million years, you would watch the crust move from the middle of the Atlantic towards, let's say, Myrtle Beach or Topsail Beach or Virginia Beach or whatever there is in Maryland. I can't think off the top of my head right now, but you guys know where I'm talking about. All of the ocean crust is moving that way. The older crust is over there by the beaches. Now, if we were looking the other way towards Africa, we would see the newest crust right there in the middle of the ocean at the mid-Atlantic ridge. And we would watch the crust get older and older and older as it moved towards Africa. So I'm going to stop that. And we are going to take a look at some of the effects of ocean to ocean divergence. So what do you get when those two types of plates pull apart? Well, let me write that up for you. So examples of where that happens. It's called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This is the longest chain of mountains in the world. It stretches almost from the top of the globe to the bottom of the globe. It's over 5,000 miles in length. It's enormous. and it's all underwater. We didn't even know it existed until the 1940s when World War II happened, and they were trying to map the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and all of a sudden they discovered this mountain range. And then in the other parts of the world, you get just mid-ocean ridges. There aren't any as big and spectacular as the one in the Atlantic, but just about where any oceanic plate is pulling away from another oceanic plate, you get this mid-ocean ridge. So what are the effects of that? Well, just like I told you, you get a volcanic mountain range, or mountain ridge, I should say. And these are less violent. So they're not, now it's not to say that they can't become more violent, because oftentimes the water creates a little bit of a problem when the volcanoes erupt, but most of the time they're less violent. You also will get small earthquakes, nothing too bad at that point, but still earthquakes, and just ridges, you know, or underwater mountains. So those are the examples, and those are the effects of ocean to ocean divergent boundaries. And our next divergent boundary, if you could guess, is going to be a continent to continent divergence. So now we've got big fat continents pulling apart. And so what happens when continents pull apart? Well, the next thing I want you to draw, if I can find it. Let me get rid of a couple of these things so they don't keep popping up on my screen. Hold on a second. Here we go. I found it. Okay, so this is what an ocean to ocean, continent to continent divergent boundary looks like. And this is what I want you to draw. So you have a piece of continental crust that's pulling away from another piece of crust. Usually that means a continent is being ripped apart for whatever reason. And what happens is the rock that's in between falls, and it forms something called a rift valley. As you can see my tiny little person there. This rock used to be up there, and it fell into, I shouldn't say into the valley floor, it fell and made the valley floor. And so this is what continent to continent divergence looks like. Make sure you draw your arrows so that you can remember which way the crust is moving. And the biggest effect are the rift valleys. So what are some examples of that in real life, and where is that happening, and what are some of the effects of that? Well, let's take a look. I promise I'm trying. All right. Whoops, I forgot to clear that off. All right, so examples. Where is this happening? Well, right now, Africa is kind of being pulled apart. And so, like, if you can find the Red Sea on a map, that is the part of Africa that is forming African rift valleys. Basically, that part of the continent is just being ripped in half. And of course, this is slow. It only occurs a few centimeters every year, but it's slowly happening. And you're probably wondering, well, how much is that? If you let your fingernails grow for an entire year, no cutting them, that's about how far a continent would move. And if you can't imagine that, imagine your hair. If you didn't cut it for a whole year, however much it grew, that's about how fast the continent is being torn apart. And so, what are the effects of a continent tearing apart? you get those things called rift valleys. That's where the rock falls into the bottom and it makes a valley floor. You get shallow earthquakes, usually not major ones, but still earthquakes. And occasionally you can get some small volcanoes. Not, well, if I could spell, not a lot, more like, I don't know, like lava flows. Because, you know, where things pull apart, it lets some of the mantle push up in there. So those are the examples and those are the effects. If you need to pause it, just pause it. We only have 2 more things to draw. Let me clear that up. And our next drawing, you're going to be on your 3rd section of this book, your 3rd and your last section. And so that, if I can find my own drawings. There, I found it. And so your last section of your tectonic flip book is going to be the transform fault boundaries. And here you go. So if you see those weird arrows, what I've done is like take 2 arrows and kind of cut them in half, because at a transform fault, excuse me, I need a drink. At a transform fault, those pieces of crust are sliding past each other. You know, they're not moving into each other. They're not pulling away. They're just like sliding past. And so this will be the 3rd section of your book. And the other drawing I want you to now include is super easy. And there's only one drawing that we are going to include in this part of the book. And that is, ta-da-da, here it is. So those are like 2 pieces of crust. They can either be ocean to ocean, or they can be continent to continent, either way. But one is moving one way, the other's moving the other way. They're just sliding past each other. Now, you probably know more about this than you do the other types that we have talked about. And you're probably thinking, what? No, I know nothing. I don't know anything she's talking about. But I should say you probably know the effects of this more than you know anything else. So let me give you some examples. All right. Am I sharing? I hope I'm sharing my white screen. I'm going to stop sharing and try that again. Okay. So let me share my whiteboard. And we are going to discuss what are the examples and what are the effects. If I can find my whiteboard again, there it is. So the most famous example is the San Andreas Fault out in California. It's a giant split between 2 plates that are moving past each other. Gigantic. And another place that this happens, these transform faults, are along the mid-ocean ridges. Because you can have more than just one type of boundary there, but usually it's a very specific boundary and then a transform fault, or a different type of boundary and a transform fault. But it's any place that ocean to ocean or continent to continent can slide past each other. And there's really just one major effect. Huge earthquakes. Whoops. Never mind. These are where the biggest earthquakes happen, are at these transform fault boundaries. What happens is they kind of stick, because you can imagine rocks don't exactly slide past each other nice and smooth. It's not like two pieces of ice sliding past each other. And so they push and they push and they push and they build up all this pressure, and then it lets go. When that lets go, boom, that's what we feel. We feel the effect, we feel the earthquake. So that is the end of your flip book. If you need to go back and get anything else, you're welcome to rewind this video, or you're welcome to look at a friend's flip book. When I get back in the classroom on Thursday, I will answer any questions you have, and we will also be taking a look at chapter 17 towards the end of it, and I'll answer any questions we have on that as well. All right, guys. Be good for Miss Rose. Bye.